Welcome to the Comedy Reset Spotlight. This is the place to be if you want to hear from some of the most innovative and exciting comedy creators from around the globe. On this podcast, you'll hear from a variety of guests who are pushing the boundaries of what comedy can be. If you're looking for fresh perspectives and new ideas, this is the podcast for you.
Episode 18. From Pittsburgh, Kansas, comedian Regina Winemiller.
When did you first start doing stand-up comedy?
Well, I started doing stand-up comedy. I started writing stand-up comedy about a year before I actually got on stage for the first time. And I got on stage to do my very first stand-up open mic in March of 2020. So, yeah, talk about timing. Right before the shutdown, the very same week. And that's how it all started.
What made you want to become a stand-up comedian?
Well, really, when I was a teenager and a preteen, I loved watching stand-up comedians on Comedy Central and on Saturday Night Live, the monologues, and on Johnny Carson. I loved Ellen DeGeneres and Seinfeld, and I felt like I could be funny, and I loved listening to comedy. So that was my original motivation. Later on, we kind of put our dreams away, right? And I never really had the courage to pursue it when I was younger. And I don't know why. I did all sorts of other crazy stuff. I could have done comedy, but it is intimidating. But then later on, when it got to be so stressful in life, I just thought, man, if I don't make a joke out of some of this stuff, it's just going to kill me. So, I decided to try to kill on stage first, I guess, so to speak, or really, anytime I couldn't sleep, I would get up, I would write jokes. I had a lot of insomnia. Yeah. And I don't know. For me, I guess it just felt like I have got to think of a way to beat the stress, and sometimes that was the only way I could get back to sleep, was by trying to make fun of the things that were keeping me up at night. And, it kind of worked. I mean, but it's been a great journey. I really enjoy it. I really do.
Who were some of your influences?
Some of my influences were, of course, Johnny Carson, Jay Leno, David Letterman. Those were the first comedians I ever really watched. I would always watch them with my mom, and she would fall asleep right away, right after the monologue. But I loved watching their monologues, and that was about it. I didn't care about the rest of the show anyway. I also really loved watching Ellen DeGeneres and Seinfeld. And those were some of my very earliest influences. Then after that, I would say more recently, Tig Notaro, Hannah Gadsby, Mike Birbiglia, and of course, Jim Gaffigan. Yeah, I really like him.
What was your first time on stage like?
Well, my first time on stage, I decided to go straight for like my most embarrassing story, or one of my most embarrassing stories, I should say. I do have a lot of them. And I got up there, and it was this huge restaurant and stage. And then it was just my two sisters that were there. And thought about not going on. And then again, I was like, well, it's not so bad. It's just my sisters. I'll do this. Sure. Why not? And then like a 12 top walks in. And they're there for the line dancing later. They're not here to listen to an open mic. Thankfully, though, the owner of the restaurant went over and quietly talked to them and said, well, we do have an open mic tonight. And there's like one person here who wants to do comedy, and it's her first time ever. So please be nice. And they were very polite. But I got up and told a story about my first time traveling abroad. And I got, I made a bad choice, okay? Yeah, I took a drug I'd never tried before. And the street name is X-Lax. Yeah. Right before I got on an airplane to go home. I have since improved this anecdotal comedy, but when I told it the very first time, I used the entire 5 minutes to describe that experience. And I got some laughs. I did, but I've learned some things, and shortened it up a little. And anyway, so when I got off the stage, one of the guys at the table said, that makes me feel better about my shit story. Yeah. So that's become part of the joke forever. And that was my first ever time on stage.
What's your favorite joke?
Okay, so maybe my favorite joke it's not my joke. It would be a Mitch Hedberg joke. And I couldn't do it justice, but he was talking about how long it takes to cook baked potatoes. He said sometimes he'll just throw one in the oven, even if he doesn't feel like it, because by the time it's done, who knows? Yeah, Mitch Hedberg.
What's the worst heckler experience you've ever had?
I don't know if you would really consider it a heckler experience, but it felt like I was getting heckled. So I did a comedy competition, and at the end of it, I did not know that they would make you stand on stage and then just openly criticize everything that they didn't like about you. And not very nicely either. So, yeah, that wasn't really a very fun experience for me.
What's the best gig you've ever had?
The best gig I've ever had was a benefit dinner for the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars. And they were just so kind and friendly and welcoming. And they wanted us to stay and have dinner and even paid us some extra. And so that was nice. And really, it was just a great time. I really, really enjoyed having that experience. And then I would say that was maybe the best. It's hard to choose, though, because I also really enjoyed doing the Broadway Comedy Club when several of my friends came to see me, and also Stand Up New York. So honestly, those three have to tie for first place.
How do you deal with stage fright?
Okay, so it's different. Stage fright is different with stand-up comedy than with the theater, play acting. I would just pretend like the audience wasn't there and the lights were so bright you didn't even see them. When you get on stage and you're doing stand-up, you have to be in the room and listen to the audience's response. So yeah, it can be quite intimidating at times, but it's really important to get in the right headspace before you go on stage. So you picture yourself doing well. Picture yourself having fun and not like bombing or something. So I think, and that advice comes from Stephen Rosenfield. Really, really good advice. Picture it going well, but don't be delusional, like they're just going to bust up at everything I say. And then also, for me, I kind of try to picture myself like as if I'm talking to my friends. Because that's the attitude and that's the headspace where you're just relaxed and having fun. And that's how I get a lot of my material anyway, is trying to remember, how did I say that thing that made so-and-so just bust up laughing? And yeah, that's basically it. Just try to get back in that headspace where you're having fun talking about that.
What was the most unexpected response you've ever gotten to one of your jokes?
Okay, so I was talking about a mammogram, and all I had said was that it squeezes it this way, and then it squeezes it this way. And this older guy from the audience shouted, "That's too much information!" I really didn't know how to respond to that, so I just kept going.
How do you prepare for a show?
Well, typically, I just rehearse my material several times, and I voice record, and then I'll listen to it back. And then I write out my set list, which is just my 1 or 2 word keywords for each joke. And then I'll try to memorize the order of my jokes. And sometimes I'll assign fingers, like my thumb is this, my pointer finger is this, and go through all of my fingers and toes and back again if it's a longer set. But yeah, that's it pretty much. And try not to be too over rehearsed either. So typically I will rehearse the day before and maybe one time the day of, but then that's it. I try not to go overboard on it.
What's the best advice you've ever been given about stand-up comedy?
The best advice I've ever been given is to have fun. That's number 1. And then also to either voice record or write everything down. And don't throw it out unless you already know and you've tried it and it's not good at all. Just don't throw anything out.
What's the worst advice you've ever been given about stand-up comedy?
I would say more like in specific situations when people have tried to help me maybe punch up a joke, but it just doesn't mesh with my persona at all. Like giving me the advice to say that as the punchline, like that I used heroin or something, which I don't. Or that, like, when I have a joke about when I saw this wrapper, like a wipe, sanitary wipe wrapper in the women's restroom, that on the cover of it, it said, "You're a vagenius." And I just thought that was funny because, like, the bar is pretty low if we're just saying, like, you're a vagenius, like a vagina genius, because you know how to wipe yourself. And I was trying to go off that premise and make some jokes out of that. And then this guy piped up and he was like, shouldn't you say P genius? I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, well, because it's a different hole. Did you know that? Yeah. Women have 2 holes down there. And I said, I understand what a urethra is, but how is this supposed to help me with my joke? What do you mean pee genius? Because women pee out of a different hole. I said, okay, it's not really getting my joke. And are you really trying to mansplain the vagina to me right now? Because it's not helping. But anyway, he meant well. You know.
What would you say is the biggest misconception about stand-up comedy?
I think the biggest misconception is that people just get up there and talk like it's that easy. It takes actually a lot of work to get to the point where you make it look easy. And really, probably a lot of people never would have tried it in the first place if they had known how much work it is to get to that point. But it is a lot of fun. I totally recommend trying it. Everybody should try it at least once. Put it on your bucket list.
What do you believe is the key to success in stand-up comedy?
Success, first of all, is hard work. And part of that work, the most important part, is writing. And you don't just write when you sit down with a pad of paper in your bedroom or office or wherever. You're writing everywhere you go. You have to be willing to pull out a pad of paper in the middle of a crowded store and kneel down on the floor and write down your ideas. You have to be willing to pull out your phone and talk into it in front of everyone once in a while because it was just too good of an idea to let it go. If you think you're going to remember it and write it or record it later, you're lying to yourself. You have to be willing and able to capture those ideas the minute they come to you and just drop almost everything else. And editing. You have to be able to edit and try out your stuff too. So yeah, it all falls under hard work, but that's the work.
What do you think is the biggest obstacle that stand-up comedians face?
I think the biggest obstacle is just getting enough stage time to really get good. Depending on where you live, there can be safety concerns or there can be no availability, but maybe once a month. You have to go far. It's late at night. Maybe you have a job in the morning. So all of those things make it difficult. I think some of that is helped greatly by having Zoom comedy. And a lot of people are down on it, but I tell you what, I've gotten a lot of practice time in on Zoom that I would not be able to physically get in person because of the area that I live in. And yeah, because of safety concerns with going late at night and far away.
What do you think sets stand-up comedy apart from other forms of comedy?
Well, number one, it's usually just the artist writing all of their own material and performing it. Just a microphone, a stage, maybe a spotlight. It's not, it's not like improv where you've got several people that are just doing it at the spur of the moment. You've got one person, all their own material, and trying to get a certain number of laughs per minute. And yeah, I think that's it.
What are the benefits of stand-up comedy?
Stand-up comedy is fun. You get to meet a lot of interesting people and just really have a lot of interesting experiences. I've been to New York a few times, and I'm just having the time of my life. I think it makes you a better speaker. It makes you a better conversationalist. It helps you to get to the point a little bit quicker. And yeah, that's it.
What's your process for writing jokes?
Whenever I think something is funny, if I've said something, if I make somebody laugh just in any random situation, I'll just stop what I'm doing and either write it down or voice record it. And then later I go back and say, how do I make this funnier? How do I make this shorter? How do I make this into a joke? But the first thing I do is I just record the whole idea. Because if you try to cut it when you're first starting out, you might lose the funny. So you got to start with whatever made you laugh and then cut later.
What's the most important thing for a stand-up comedian to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is really just to have fun and also stay true to yourself. Maybe make sure that what you're saying, that you really have some buy-in and credibility with it. Because if you're trying to be fake, people are going to see through it. So stay true to yourself. If you're a new comic, especially, don't get up there and just try to go for the shock factor, because that just doesn't go over well. If it's just something you really think is funny, people usually go along with you. So yeah, have fun, stay true to yourself.
What do you think are the best techniques for dealing with hecklers?
Well, I think the best techniques sometimes can be to just say, I'm sorry you feel that way. This was advice, I think, from Tig Notaro. She said, you don't necessarily have to always think of a witty comeback. You just say, well, I'm not for everybody, or I'm not your cup of tea. And that's a good way to diffuse a situation, especially if you're not quite sure how to handle it. She said, anybody can use that. So I haven't had to yet, but I think that's one I'll keep in my back pocket. And it feels kind of teachery too, you know. So that's one way I can stay true to myself on there. I don't feel like getting into like a argument with anyone. That's not a good way to deal with that. But you know, if you just have a little one line, little comeback here and there that you kind of keep at your side. I don't know. Like, I'm so good at just coming up with stuff on the spot, right? You know, I do plan to take an improv class. Actually, I've done improv. It's been a long time. I think that's the one situation where that can really help, is with just talking to people in the audience and dealing with an unexpected situation. Or like when that guy yelled out about, that's too much information, when I was talking about my mammogram. Maybe I could have come up with a better response than nothing. But yeah, I think number one, you might have a saying at the ready about just like a comeback, or you just tell them, sorry you feel that way. And that's another way to diffuse it, because people don't like hecklers. Like the rest of the audience, most of the time they're there to just have a good time, listen to the comedian, and not listen to the stupid drunk person trying to make you mad. So that's what I think. Just be nice, but also get the audience on your side I have heard you're supposed to let the first one go, and then the next one you go back and just lay into them. But I think it really just depends on the situation and what they're saying. If they're saying something super mean, yeah, let it go, deal with it on the next go around, or just have a very matter of fact, hey, that's not cool, or whatever kind of response.
What do you think are the biggest mistakes that stand-up comedians make?
I think probably the biggest mistakes that stand-up comedians make, especially just starting out, are to try to be too edgy or gross and go for the low-hanging fruit, like really nasty sex stuff and really gross material. And then I think other times comedians make mistakes by being under the influence of something while they're on stage because they think that that's going to give them courage to do their material, but really it just messes them up, and usually they end up bombing.
What is the best way to learn stand-up comedy?
I think you really need to start out with a class and studying the greats. And then after that, you have to learn by doing. Get on stage, get on mics, get on shows, and feel it out for yourself.
What do you think is the best way to improve as a stand-up comedian?
The best way to improve anything is just practice and trial and error, and then really to work at it. And don't give up or settle for mediocre or just okay on your material. Got to try to improve it, and you've got to try to improve yourself. So practice, and yeah, do it more.
What has stand-up comedy taught you about yourself?
Comedy has taught me...
What has comedy taught me about myself? Well, I think I've learned that I have a lot of courage in some circumstances. And to be able to get up and just do that and go places and try it. And I know, and I've known for a while, that I didn't really value myself. That comedy has taught me that you have to value yourself. You can't go get on stage and command a room for people to listen to you if you don't think that you're worth listening to. So you have to find that value in yourself. And so that's something I've learned, how to value myself and how to put myself out there for others.
What motivates you to keep performing stand-up comedy?
Well, what motivates me to keep performing stand-up comedy would just be that I really enjoy making people laugh. I enjoy bringing joy to others, especially in these really trying times. Ultimately, my goal is to hear other people laugh and just to get that response and reaction. And to use that sort of stress relief for myself, but it's not just for me. I want everybody else to feel that feeling too. And so if I can bring just that little bit of a relief from whatever the moment, whatever the new thing is that's making everybody mad or sad or the latest thing in your own personal life, then that is my motivation to keep going and doing this.
What advice would you give to someone who's thinking about doing stand-up comedy?
Hey, if you're thinking about trying stand-up comedy, I say go for it. You never know. Number one, you never know how long you have on this earth. That was when I started out. And before I ever got on stage, it was right before the pandemic. And I thought, I better try to get on stage because I don't know what's going to happen next. You just don't know. So if you have a dream and you want to do it, just try it. And then, so have the courage to do it. Number one, have the courage to try it. And then number two, take a class, get a comedy buddy, and really start working through the steps of doing it. But even if you just get up and just tell a funny story your first time, just anything just to try it and get your legs under you. And just don't be afraid, just to go for it. Even if it doesn't go well the first time, you might get some really good laughs and get an idea if it's for you or not.
I've been your host, Rob Chaffee. Don't forget to laugh today. It's good for you. Comedy Reset Spotlight is a podcast that brings you today's freshest and funniest comedy creators. If you like what you heard, please subscribe to hear more.